right. Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Car Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple. And thank you, Rita. I hired her. I'm really delighted tonight to welcome José Vadi to celebrate his book, Chipped, Writing from a Skateboarder's Lens. Let's give a hand for José. José is joined tonight by Ted Barrow. Let's give a hand for Ted. I'm really excited. I usually don't do like a preamble before book events because I want people's work to speak for itself, etc. But I'm a big Vadi fan, so I have to say that first and foremost. And I'm a former wannabe skater, so this like really spoke to me and like my younger self, and I'm really glad to see all of you here celebrating this really excellent book, and thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you for joining us here tonight in San Francisco, both in person and online. Hello, online audience. We have cameras over there for them. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement. We are on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, and we think that acknowledgement without action kind of leaves one wanting, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. We have a kind of streamlined process for that. If you're interested, we have a QR code at the back desk that will take you directly to the Ramaytush Ohlone Land Trust website, where you can find more details on how to participate in this project of renaturation. I have very brief business before I let these two take it away. Now's a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. I would say picture taking is like fine. Yeah, it's fine. Encouraged even. But don't take a call in the middle of the event. That would suck. Don't do that, please. Please check out our full event calendar on our website at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us. And I'm going to plug one event because it's important, because Saturday is Independent Bookstore Day. Yeah. And it's like our biggest, outside of Christmas Eve, it is our biggest day of the year. And we're going to give away a whole bunch of books, more than you might anticipate. We're going to have a tarot reader here. We're doing a pop-up with local artist Jan Chaco. We have a lot of fun stuff going on, and it really celebrates our industry and people who read books. So I hope you folks are able to come by. The restroom is behind me. It is available after the event and not during the event for obvious reasons. If you need to know how to get there, do let me know, and I will gladly help you. We have copies of both of José's books available at the front register. You can find them there, and I'm sure he'll gladly sign them afterward. He's going to sign. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the authors who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, and in this case, an excellent book. So if you're able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so kindly. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two folks who are joining us this evening. First, Ted Barrow, PhD, is a writer, art historian, curator, skateboarder, and host of This Old Ledge for Thrasher magazine. Barrow has worked as a professor and curator in New York City, but has contributed over the past few years to numerous academic conferences devoted to skateboarding, including Pushing Borders in Europe, that's Borders, BOARDERS, and Slow Impact in Arizona. His writing has appeared in Art Forum, Alta Journal, Juxtapose, and the New York Times. He lives and skates in San Francisco. Let's give one more hand. And last but most certainly not least, José Vadi is the author of Interstate, Essays from California, an award-winning essayist, poet, and playwright, and film producer. His work has been featured by the Paris Review, The Atlantic, PBS NewsHour, Free Skate Magazine, Alta Journal, and Yale Review. He lives and writes in Sacramento, and his book Chipped is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more hand for José.
One more round of applause for Car. Their support is immense for a lot of writers locally and beyond. So it's a real pleasure and honor to be here with all of y'all. It truly is. How's it going, Ted?
I'm ready for you to read.
I'm gonna read. This is called No Lurk Limit, and this will get us into all of this. This is from Chipped. Some of this was originally published in Free Skate Mag, but a lot of it has changed. So No lurk limit. Inserting a skate video VHS into the family video console felt intrinsically renegade. The black brick holding together the magnetized videotape might as well have been a Girls Gone Wild video or something equally salacious and unregulated. Before smartphones and online video, watching skate videos on the same console on which my parents watched 16 Minutes was akin to trying to carve out some privacy to watch scrambled clips of the Playboy channel. Maybe it was the decade in which skate videos entered our home that made them feel a part of this larger underground culture of downtown Los Angeles, raves, kart races, and music scenes amidst a mainstream televised MTV of everything from same-sex awareness to voter registration programming. Skateboarding's most representative and labor-intensive presentation is the skate video. If a band's 4-vinyl gatefold mega album were a skate video, it'd be a 30-minute compression of a dozen individualized parts, with each skater's part its own 2 to 3 minute solo project. An accumulation of years' worth of work for just a few seconds of documented tricks, clips, sequenced, compressed, and shared across digital platforms onto a skater's glowing screen. If Skate Magazine's still photography offers questions about the form's possibilities, skate videos present the answers at full speed or in slow motion homage. The proof is the movement and sonics behind every landed or failed trick. And while a magazine may capture a moment in time, nothing can help you visualize it more than hearing skateboarding at full volume. Skate videos are passports to the world skateboarding opens. From the pants, the shoulders leading to a well-popped maneuver, and the soundtrack to the angle of the cameras and the light flares, it all adds to the spectacle skateboarding offers through visualized demonstration. This is how you skate. This is how you should look rolling away, escaping death, arrest, or both. What if being a basketball fan meant no longer watching LeBron on TV, but only seeing LeBron train in the gym? There's an energy, a passion missing in such spaces that is palpable, particularly when presented through video. Growing up, I hyper-memorized as many skate videos as possible. Every new song became a portal to a new band, record label, a genre of music. In a pre-streaming world, skate videos were unintentional mixtapes. Brands were defined by their soundtracks and tastes, finding songs tasteful enough to soundtrack a skater's part. That part doesn't even have to be that good. The song can act as a savior, a literal redemption song for otherwise lackluster parts, preventing someone from smashing the fast-forward button on the remote control. Skate spots became visually memorized through their frequent appearances in skate videos. With usually only one filmer and several skaters to shoot, famous spots like Lockwood Elementary in Los Angeles or Love Park in Philadelphia were introduced through cameos. This allowed the viewer to see how skaters were skating and filming together, landing tricks on the same day in the same sessions as told by their corresponding outfits, helping us understand the mechanics of being a sponsored skater making a skate video. One afternoon, after watching Kareem Campbell's trilogy part for the 3rd consecutive time, my mom laughed after his slow-motion nollie hardflip over a picnic table. "I like that line," she said. "It's clever." It took me a moment to realize she was referring to the rap delivered by Nasir Jones, aka Nas, when he says, "I'd open every cell in Attica, send them to Africa." Painting his vision of what a world would look like if Nas were in control, Campbell's part in Trilogy enabled my parents to see the sonically conscious dimension of hip-hop and how it related to the Last Poets album they started playing when I was 10 years old, warning of the conditions of Black America's streets. Part of the reason my parents placed needle to record was the Southern California in which I was raised, a decade that started with the LA riots, transitioned into the years-long OJ trials, and continued with the punitive 3 strikes policy of California Governor Pete Wilson. Wilson's infamous Prop 187, which attempted to create a state-administered citizenship system that denied immigrants basic social services, stripping them of health care and access to education, faced public outcry and was ultimately deemed unconstitutional. As predominantly black and brown skaters pushed street skateboarding forward at San Francisco's Justin Herman Plaza and the schoolyards of LA, they were progressing the form under a heightened state of police brutality and incarceration of black and brown men throughout California. Tales of the World Industries crew skating Lockwood described the skaters getting the pass from local gangs affiliated with skater Fabian Alomar's family. But what of the state-sponsored violence of the 1990s Los Angeles? The decade closed with the infamous Rampart scandal with the LAPD, exposing the violent, corrupt anti-gang task force Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums, aka CRASH, that patrolled Rampart Village and neighboring areas. Crash framed civilians and gang members alike in gang-related killings, its members committing perjury to double down on their false charges. The scandal resulted in more than 100 civil cases filed against the LAPD and over $125 million in punitive damages. In 2018, the LA Times broke an investigation about gangs permeating units of LA County Sheriff's Department, including a unit with white supremacist ties in Compton, a predominantly and historically black neighborhood. These units, like Crash, also have their own identifying tattoos. In 2021, a Loyola Marymount University study identified 18 such groups that have existed over the last 5 decades. In May 2023, the County Inspector General ordered 35 sheriff's deputies to report for a physical examination to see if any had gang-affiliated tattoos. Instead of complying, the officers sued through their union representatives just days after the order. The extent of the Crash scandal is immeasurable 2 decades later, but what is known is that many of Crash's harmful acts were done in Greater Silver Lake, Echo Park, and East Hollywood, the areas of Los Angeles that Kareem Campbell and the World and Girl crews helped put on the map for skateboarders through their video parts. By Trilogy's release, incarceration rates were increasing in black communities not only for three strikes related charges, but for predominantly non-violent crimes and drug offenses, despite the concurrent rise of violent crimes within white populations during the same 10-year period from 85 to 95. As such, Campbell and company created and documented some of the most amazing street skateboarding in the culture's history during the most punitive era against black citizens in Los Angeles by the city's police forces. Campbell's teammate Shiloh Greathouse, who grew up in the neighborhoods near Lockwood Elementary, filmed his Trilogy part fresh off of a 16-month bid. His last trick, a backside nose blunt slide across the entire top of a picnic table, was from his first skate session after release. Greathouse filmed and completed his part over the next 6 months while living in a halfway house. As Nas says at the top of his rap soundtracking Campbell's USC line, imagine smoking weed in the streets without cops harassing. Imagine going to court with no trial. The bars begin with a dream and end with a nightmare portrait of our courts. My folks fear that this new fad, this skateboard theme, will lead me into the streets towards those forces neither they nor I could control, despite the new compass I directed beneath my feet. I think I'll stop there.
Yeah. I was. Oh, this thing.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Ted.
I was trying to read along, and then I realized that you were just killing it, and I could actually just listen. So, thank you for that, and also thank you for that vital reminder of how much of your own background in poetry and performance and slam.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this chapter out loud yesterday, and it didn't sound at all like that. Completely different cadence. What I loved about the excerpts from this chapter that you chose to read is that I think that you isolated or highlighted 2 different approaches that you can see threading through a lot of these essays in Chipped, which everyone should buy if you haven't already read. That's why we're at a bookstore. Which are the kind of personal, specifically almost granular biographical experience of learning about the world through skateboarding. And then what you did in that second description by using Kareem Campbell's part in Trilogy as a way to talk about police brutality, LAPD corruption, Crash, Prop 187, and things like that. And I think there's this like amazing span that happens. It's like a rubber band that goes back and forth between the very specific and the more broad and political, the personal and political, I guess you could say. That distance, though, is kind of how I'm going to talk about this first question, which is, in the experience of writing Chipped versus in the wake of releasing Interstate, how has your approach been? What have been the differences for you in approaching these 2 different books?
Yeah, I feel like Chipped is very much looking at skateboarding in basically Interstate was very much like hyper experience, like me walking down the street, almost like this very like super first person experience of like wanting to draw the reader into my everyday. Like this is what it's like on BART at this hour of day. This is, just trying to make it as experiential as possible and using myself and my narrative kind of as a character in the book to make that possible. And I feel like Chipped is doing that to a certain extent, but it's more so about trying to talk about these like kind of larger themes and these larger trends that aren't necessarily connected to the personal experience that's like on the page, but is a little like microcosmic, or is kind of like a gateway to talk about 90s Los Angeles, you know, because, and then by way of doing that, trying to put the reader in the position of, as a kid who's a kid of color, a product of immigrants in 90s LA, you know, skateboarding is part of a world that I'm engaging with, and this world has all these other things. Like it has politicians that are enacting legislation that is, you know, threatening certain communities, and it's like, it's kind of bringing in more of like, I guess you could say the popular culture, things like music, you know, the socioeconomic conditions of like where people are skateboarding, versus like me trying to bring everyone into like the narrative, so to speak. Like it's a little more like, I don't know, like they're trying to bring in other sources that aren't so dependent on like me and my experiences exclusively, you know.
Now, is that by necessity, since a lot of this book of essays, Chipped, was written during or directly after the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was written pretty much, it started like at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, so even the ability to go skate was different. I mean, I remember at Rockridge at the time, people were skating with masks, you know, and you feel like a bandit, you know, like chasing, like, I don't know. It was an interesting fits during that time. But yeah, like
I experienced the cringe legacy of skating the best I ever skated in 2020, but also all of my footage has a stupid bandana around my neck.
Yeah.
It's awful. Anyway, go on.
No, it has, you know, a little flair. But yeah, it's like, it was a different time, and even the outside space had all these different rules that were different than a pre-pandemic time. Like skate parks are getting filled up with sand, and basketball hoops are getting taken, the rims are getting taken down. So yeah, like Interstate was very much a hyper experiential, like, this is, I want you guys to understand what it's like to be in this Bay Area at this time. Whereas Chipped was kind of a little bird's eye view more, and just kind of looking at the lay of the land and really trying to see across these different periods from like 96 to 2023, 2022, how skateboarding has impacted all these different periods of my life, versus looking at a very specific part of the Bay Area and like writing from that.
It sort of seemed like, and you'll forgive me if I haven't, I didn't reread Interstate in preparation for this talk, but it sort of seemed like you were much more talking about the experience of skateboarding in Chipped versus the kind of following the traces of skate history as you did, along with other histories and topographies and narratives that you did in Interstate. So one, we were sort of talking about this, and maybe this is a little too cute of a way to say it, but one is very much experiential, Interstate. It's about mapping the Bay Area, finding your connection to it, considering your own history and how you're changing and how you're thinking about that. And this one feels much more referential.
Yeah, very much, and bringing in a lot of different references that are not connected to skateboarding exclusively. You know, like we're talking about, there's an essay where I imagine Sun Ra as like a skateboarder, and being my favorite skateboarder. There's moments where I talk about, you know, speaking.
We have graphics.
We have graphics of Mr. Ra. Here we have Sun Ra with the orchestra in front of their Osage Avenue house, not Osage Avenue, their house in Philadelphia. This is a commune they've lived in since the 70s.
He looks like he might skate.
Yeah, I mean,
like Welcome or something like that.
There could be like a loophole wheels kind of hoodie situation going on here.
Yeah,
iPath, yeah, totally. But like, you know, bringing in music, bringing in, you know, dissecting Nas lyrics, you know, bringing in stats around the LAPD, and trying to bring in more like socioeconomic context, political context of these skate videos that we grew up watching that didn't necessarily have that, other than like interviews where you learn this pro skater just got out of jail, or this pro skater, you know, owns the company or designed the graphics. So, but yeah, like this is definitely trying to bring in all these different sources. And also one of the biggest challenges was like, as a skateboarder, can I describe what skateboarding feels like on the page and not come off corny or like, you know, super presumptive or super like didactic, like this is how it is, like this is what it means to shred kind of thing. Like it's like, yeah, you know.
What does it mean to shred?
You know? It's like no, I mean, it's just,
Sorry, that's a horrible question.
the concrete wave, man. It's like a concrete wave.
Sorry.
So shred, no, that was...
Actually, one of the things that I noticed while reading your book is that you are very much more attuned to the sonic qualities of skateboarding, if not the actual sounds that it makes and the way that the drum-like skateboard reverberates through your body, but also just what songs might mean, you know? And I recommend the Sun Ra essay to anyone who hasn't yet read it. Start with that, maybe even if you, but because it's a good way in. But also sound and the sort of ways that skateboarding kind of produces these different spatial things.
No, totally, yeah. Like
Technologies.
Sonics is huge. I mean, like every skater, you can hear a skateboard coming like a block or two away, and you start turning and you start seeing like, what are they riding? What are they doing? You know, that you can hear that sensation. I imagine for skaters in the 70s too, when they went from like steel wheels to urethane, like that must have been a trip. Like your entire relationship was like is turned about. But yeah, like when you're skating down the street, it's so loud and you're kind of taking up space in a different way, or you're creating this. I mean, it's not surprising that like skaters and like public musicians are kind of in the same space in terms of like noise complaints. You know what I mean? Like we're creating a new sonic space wherever we're at, but we're also like, you know, reconfiguring those spaces in ways that are maybe creative.
When you were a part of the Youth Speaks thing and the slam poet, were you also kind of considered in that same eddy of skateboarders and musicians?
Well, it's funny, like spoken word has this, it's like within writing, slam poets are kind of considered in a sense like, I don't know, like they're kind of like the skaters in that they're not the traditional approach to writing, you know what I mean? It's like it's bringing in hip hop, it's bringing in more cadence. People think that it's freestyling even though it's not. And you know, you are kind of like on the margins of like the literary scene in a sense. Like people don't necessarily take you seriously if they hear like slam poet. They think they have a projection that they can put onto you. But, you know, in public spaces or in spaces like this, you know, if we were doing like a school assembly for kids, you know, a poet might pop out here, a poet might pop out behind the bookshelf. We might time it in a way where like we turn an auditorium or an open mic or something like that into a different performative space that challenges the audience relationship with the stage. So it kind of reconfigures the space to like intentional disruption. You know what I mean? Like we're gonna like mix it up in order to have folks pay attention in a different way and have writing kind of be exciting in a more performative context.
When did you start skating and when did you start writing poetry?
It kind of coincided. Like I started skating around 96 and was like writing by 97, 98. It was
Really?
like, it was like one kind of begot the other in a weird way.
Can you maybe expand on that a little bit? Because that's super interesting to me. Because you started when you were 12 or 13, is that correct?
Yeah, and like started keeping, I think it was like starting to keep a journal and starting to take photos. Those two things started first because I saw that in, you know, Thrasher or Transworld, you saw skaters taking photos of each other, and you saw like in the back of Thrasher photos submitted by other skaters of their friends skateboarding. So that kind of became this like, okay, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take photos, like however good or bad they are, like take photos. And then there's a couple different skaters and artists that were putting out like kind of these columns. Like at Templeton had a column in Transworld skateboarding. There was a column called Brain Floss, which is like a 2-page art spread in Transworld. So these kind of like editorials that were a little more abstract and challenging the reader, I picked up on pretty early. And in addition to like the record reviews in the back of skate mags, and just started figuring out, as much as I was figuring out who the skaters were and who the photographers were, figuring out who the writers were in skate mags as well. But how that all led to poetry, I don't know. Like, I feel like poetry was just kind of like the gateway drug, or like it was like the easiest thing for me at the time to kind of like, it's almost like a scream. It's just like, this is how I feel. And like in a stanza, like, la, la, this is what it is. And then we'll leave it be. But that was like a bunch of that kind of stuff.
But it's really interesting to me that I would assume, I started a little bit I started around 10, prepubescent, but the way that you relate to the world changes profoundly as you mature. And skateboarding is one way to explore those boundaries, but not a great way to actually articulate those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I also grew up reading skate writers and stuff, but I just also kind of never took that very seriously, which is such a shame, or I was insecure about it. So it's really cool that early on, and you can tell when you read this book, everyone, that that you have, at times there's this sort of like bombastic, performative way that you're describing something, particularly the Sun Ra essay, but there are also times when you're very, very tender and vulnerable and thoughtful and almost quiet, which is a weird way to describe words written on a page that are one person trying to describe another thing. And so it's interesting that they started at the same time, but did they satisfy different sides of your brain? I mean, were you a board thrower and screamer? Or did you get it all out on the page?
No, I had a lot of like, in hindsight, I was like a temper tantrum kind of kid when I was skateboarding. I was like throwing shit and like, the chip decks were very much a product of anger. I think initially of just like kicking boards, you know what I mean? And just like frustration. I grew up playing basketball a lot too, and I always drew like really hard fouls. I realized like I was like I needed like some physicality was like just a thing.
Yeah.
And I think I got a lot of that out with skateboarding, and like releasing that. All of the music I was listening to was very much like that kind of like entry level Discord Records kind of stuff, and just like very much just attuning to anything that had energy and movement and like that was loud. I was just all about it. So I don't know. I think it was just the power of being outside. Like in the suburbs in LA too, like movement is so dependent on the car that the ability to propel myself anywhere was really empowering. And a lot of those early poems were just writing about that. We're just like writing about the fear of falling or like going fast down a hill or something like that. I don't know.
You were writing about skateboarding that early.
Yeah, but it sucked. You know what I mean? Like it was really cheesy.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? It was like total cutting room floor stuff. But like none of that's in Shipped. I swear, nothing from 1996 is in Shipped, allegedly. But that's like I was trying, but it was like this thing. I was basically trying to articulate a change. I was like, there's all this music and like poetry. I think was just kind of like felt like. I can't be in a punk band right now, but this is as close to like a punk lyric as I can get. Like I'm not Guru from Gangstar, but like this is as close as a rap as I can get. You know what I mean? There's also that
kind of like the Guru from Gangstar.
But like
yourself some credit,
But just like kind of like trying out these different things that are inspiring you, like trying to kind of respond to them in your own way as a kid. I felt that kind of connection where it's like, if they're doing this, then I need to do something. You know what I mean? Like if skateboarders are doing this, if Jamie Thomas is doing the leap of faith, then I need to do something. I don't know. It was like this kind of like weird call and response of like, shit, like this, I can at least do a journal. You know what I mean? I can at least like go outside and take a photo or something.
Well, it's also kind of interesting that Ed Templeton and Jamie Thomas are linked in 1996 through Toy Machine, and then kind of like Zero starts under the Tumyeto banner.
Mm-hmm.
So that you do have someone who is unapologetically an artist and someone who shows their body in the body of their partner, and there's nudity and there's injury and there's prose and there's imagery. And then you also have Jamie Thomas, which is like skulls and
or the failure. Yeah, of the fall. So there's Jamie Thomas right there. But like this is like from Welcome to Hell, and like so you have like this very you're a kid, you're watching these skate videos, you're seeing people fall, and then you're seeing like this band Failure is playing the set. But isn't this kind of like a found poem? You know what I mean? Like there's like this like body just laid out. There's this crowd watching it, and there's this term hovering above it like a black cloud, and it's like I don't know. It's like a still life found poem in a weird way. But
well, let me just interject and say, I've seen this video probably 500 times, and that scene never stood out to me. So this is the experience of reading Jose's book, is that he finds these moments throughout in almost every chapter and every essay, and he highlights those, and those become meaningful, and he explains them the way he just did. And I think that that's a really, I mean, it's like hearing about something that you love from someone else that loves that thing for a completely different reason and uses a different language for it.
Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, of course. Got you.
Should we watch some videos?
Yeah, let's do watch some videos. So let's watch Kareem Campbell. And,
We're pulling up your edit, Max.
yeah. And so this is, you refer to this video in...
Yeah, in the piece I read, No Lurk Limit, this is the video I was referencing. This is 1996. World Industries is the company, and Trilogy is the video. Trilogy features 3 skate companies, technically 4, but 3 skate companies. The final company is World Industries, and it starts with their marquee pro, for sure.
Yeah.
Kareem Campbell kicks us off, so...
Let's go.
It's kind of divided by 2 parts, but just to kind of show you some of the stuff I was thinking about.
So little skits. Are we going to narrate while we're... Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. We need that method man.
Yeah, we definitely do. I'm like the method man to your red man.
There you go. Jersey all day. Yeah. So yeah, this is Kareem Campbell, and he is the... So like, this is 1996, a lot of this is filmed in 95, 94. I mean, this is, you can see the Guess logo on the back of the pants, like you kind of see where the era that we're dealing with here.
He had his own shoe company at this point, signature Kareem Campbell Kicks. And then when you see a shoe with a gum sole, that will be his.
Right there. And so this part is kind of divided in 2 sections. This is the first section where it's like we got Method Man, it's again pretty traditional skate part. You know what I mean? Like,
I also just want to point out, sorry,
go ahead.
We'll never get through this if I keep doing this, but he's skating handrails.
He's skating handrails.
He's like, this is like Jamie Thomas territory, and he's...
Yeah, this is like some very big terrain for Kareem Campbell, and which is what, and I look at that, like from flat over. This is Chafee in San Gabriel Valley, near where I grew up. So this kind of lackadaisical style, super chill, and then then turn it up maybe.
Dear Charlotte, how's the big house treat? As for me, just filming for this world bid. I can't wait to see you back on the streets, so we could do Western videos like Chocolate.
Shots fired at this company that comprised of people that left World Industries a few years ago and did a Western video directed by Spike Jones.
So Kareem is now writing a teammate of his, Shiloh, who's in jail. I talked about him in the essay.
Cowboy.
So this is kind of like this interesting shot-on-film interlude diss track circa 1996.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Oh yeah, Day One says what's up.
This is also kind of a shot, like about goldfish.
Fishing at the pond.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what he expects to catch.
But like, look how cool this is. He's got weed, he's got money, he's got beer, he's got, like, this dude's chilling.
Yeah.
And then we go into a CarMax commercial. So that's fine.
I get a cut from these ads. So.
Yeah, sorry. We'll donate it to Green Apple.
But I love this. That ledge is not waxed.
Yeah.
In USC, when it's, you only skate by the fountain.
And so now, it's 1996. Nas, If I Ruled the World is like the greatest song known to man. And
we've gone from Nasty Nas of 93 to neoliberal Nas 96.
Yeah.
If I Ruled the World.
Yeah, capitalism exists in the Nas era.
Let one individual lead us through.
And we're skating khakis in LA in 96. Like that's like, kind of a statement, you know what I mean? Like, we were not allowed to wear certain gear at school, including big baggy khaki pants, because it was like affiliated with gangs. This is Lockwood Elementary,
which is gang territory.
Big gang territory, middle of LA.
This is San Diego.
Yeah, this is fun. But
Cyrus territory.
But this is Kareem at the top of his game. If I Ruled the World and everything in it. I free all my sons. So imagine, you're my mom. You immigrated from Mexico and you grew up in LA. You have seen LA from the 50s through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and now we're in the 90s. And you remember when Curtis Blow, that song came out, and now you're hearing your kid watch this video of this dude skating, checking his pager in between tricks. And, you're kind of hearing, this is kind of how a parent and son are kind of getting along or finding these intersections, right?
Yeah, there's several really sweet sections where in your book where you talk about how your parents relate to these videos and to which kind of music you could get away with and which kind of music you had to turn down. Yeah. I mean,
oh, totally, exactly. Like you're kind of code switching sonically. You're like, okay, they like this Nas song, but this make them say chocolate tour constant. Yeah. We're turning that shit down. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we're keeping that on the low.
You DJ.
You're kind of DJing, because that VHS is taking over space again. Sonics, the spaces that you engender when you're playing this full blast, and you're like after school special. Yeah, we'll play.
And then here's like. Your father, who's from Harlem.
Yep.
This is for him because this is New York, and he knows exactly where this is. Something you described.
Yep.
He's okay.
He's okay, y'all.
He's an electrician now.
He's got a union gig. He's solid. But yeah, so you can go from Los Angeles to
unlike most skateboarders,
he has insurance. You can go from Manhattan. This is the Manhattan side of the Brooklyn Bridge. Yeah. Ted has an amazing episode about this skate spot on the season 2 of This Old Ledge Thrasher magazine. Plug. It does. And, so we're able to kind of see the diaspora of black and brown skaters on either side of the coast within 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Within 2 skate parks, we're able to see the different styles, the different fits, the different terrain. And
the other thing I wanted to add, when you were talking about how amazing it was that these videos were made in an era of increased police presence and targeting black and brown people in general and young men in particular, that it's also that these spots were kind of neglected. Like the reason why Lockwood was the spot it was not just because those skaters grew up near there, but because it was gang territory that you couldn't have Lockwood in Beverly Hills.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. And it really speaks to the opportunism of skateboarders in
oh yeah, Sam Devlin. No, we're gonna go 101 because I want to talk about this because I think it's kind of, you have a great description of this in your book.
Yeah.
But this is not a Scopus's company. We're just going to do the intro and then we'll go back to the lights on and maybe even take some questions from that.
Oh yeah, this kind of pulls the reveal of how skateboarding industry is. It's this
beautiful graphic, and then you see it's just held together with
a broomstick on a turntable, maybe, you know what I mean? But then you kind of see, skateboarding is a culture. Skateboarding has its own film industry, photography industry. And so you're able to see, through this weird robotic voice, saying these different skaters' names in different cadences.
And it took a while to figure this out.
Right.
This is so 90s right here, don't explain it, just put it in your face and you have to catch up.
Yeah. So, what are these sounds? What are these things? And as a kid, you're trying to figure it out. And you're like, oh, they're saying the names of the skaters in these different cadences. But, again, the role of the skate video, this isn't on your phone. This is right in the skate shop or right in your parents' living room.
Yeah.
And you're kind of forcing them to listen to 4 different robots saying 4 different pro skaters' names in different cadences. But this is these guys might as well have been the Beatles in 1996. You know what I mean? These are some of the 4 greatest skaters ever.
I was also just thinking about how this related to the LA Boys and band this, and also the virtual reality intro.
Yep.
But I'll turn it down and we can. So your parents probably like this song.
Yeah. Okay. This is a great example. So now we've got soul music. This is BT Express. Do It Till You're Satisfied. Amazing soul song. So, from soul tracks that might even be in the vinyl collection a couple feet away. We're again, skate videos are entire playlists or entire passports. But you can kind of get down and have a badass soundtrack and be the DJ of your household if you let your kids skateboard, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But yeah, we wanted to kind of just show a little bit of the skate video culture. You
As
know,
if this crowd of, I think 70% skateboarders at least have never seen a skate video before.
yeah, you know, try to show. Well, shout out to the old Union Square right there. That was
Yeah.
the before times. If you want to watch the conversation featuring Gene Hackman, good excuse to see an old Union Square aerial view.
Or Anti-Heroes Fucktards.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Sean Young. What was it? Oh, not that. So, yeah, this is funny because I was just going to point this out. Your story, Sick Boy, is about hurting your knee. But you described this video which is from 1988, which is pretty much the year that I started skating. And so I kind of love that there was this. I often have a hard time relating to young people, and you're a young person to me. Young people's idea about skateboarding, words about skateboarding. So I really appreciate, and José does this in most of his chapters, how he thoughtfully looks back to the prehistory of skateboarding before he got into it,
Yeah.
and also how he connects that from the kind of, again, the broad and the general to the personal and specific. But I also, I'm gonna get all 9th century Evo Gospels on you too. What I felt, I don't know what your religious background was, but I felt that there was a sort of pilgrimage theme to Interstate. Of the holy sites and kind of like that ecstatic journey that one takes, maybe a bit stoned, I don't know. Whereas this one felt so relevant now because I think even if we're sick of hearing about 2020 and the pandemic, we are all still very much processing the pandemic, and we're processing how life has changed and how our relationship to the world has changed. I was reading right before I reread Chipped. I was reading Elvia Wilkes' Death by Landscape, and she has her final chapter is called The Queen of Reps, and it's about her devotion to productivity, or maybe even unhealthy obsession with writing, being glued to a screen through the pandemic for 10 hours a day. She and her partner would separate into different pods basically. And I loved that yours was spent learning slappies at Rock Ridge and trying to embody Sun Ra. And I sort of think this is St. Matthew kind of ecstatically writing the Gospels in Sacramento with the kind of ruins of San Francisco and the Bay Area on the coast there in the horizon as the emblem for you writing this book.
It's not too far off. I mean, a lot of learning slappies and learning and slappies is when you bash into a curb versus popping into a curb or a ledge, usually a curb. But it really had a super positive impact because it realigns the way in which you skate. Everything you learned is totally 180'd. I think, but in the pandemic, there was a huge search for, in my case, there's a huge search for just joy. You know what I mean? And I really wanted to find this concept of joy as a rebellious act, and thinking about how in times when we talk in the Sunrise essay, I talk about how cabaret laws were used against jazz musicians to prohibit certain acts of, basically joy, and how it relates to just, skateboarding in certain contexts. But yeah, in the years leading up to the pandemic, I was kind of taking skateboarding for granted, and I'll skate a little bit and not skate for a month, and just kind of it'll always be there kind of thing. And as more and more spots were getting eliminated, and as, our relationship with space changed drastically in the pandemic, it was this urgency to be present with the things I care about, skateboarding included, let alone everything that we bring into the book. It felt just extremely palpable and necessary to just try these new things and try to do things that engendered as much joy as possible. I think I got into Sun Ra a lot because one of the films about Sun Ra is called A Joyful Noise, which Sun Ra it's a biblical reference. When the cops in the movie, they talk about it, but it's a beautiful documentary that everyone should see, shot in the 70s era that that photo illuminates. But the cops basically come because of noise complaints. They're playing in a brownstone all night, and the cops tell Sun Ra, like, we're here because we have noise complaints. He's like, I don't know anything about noise. I'm playing what the Bible says, which is a joyful noise, and which is music. It's how music is described in the Bible. But that kind of concept got to me a lot, and I started thinking about the punk bands I loved growing up and how they would reconfigure spaces in ways that made them feel comfortable. Same with hip hop groups. Sage Seltzer, pro skater, also goes by Navy Blue as a rapper, and oftentimes encourages his audience to like meditate or hold like kind of like chants together, and all that stuff was really interesting and very just kind of really inspired me, obviously, and I lived in Rockridge, and it felt like if I don't learn slappies now during this like hellhole of a period, like what am I doing kind of thing.
Yeah.
But just trying to like centralize all the things that brought me joy as much as possible, and not surprisingly, it related to like writing and music and skateboarding. But skateboarding was kind of that first thing that opened up that whole world. So yeah, by way of slappies and Kristen Ebling's YouTube video of how to position my feet, I figured it out.
Nice. I think we should reconfigure the space to let the audience make some noise with questions. Yep, right there.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a question or like an engagement in conversation, but I really love how you talked about kind of like the racialization of space, like geographic space, and how we have these boundaries or containers, both in public space and private space, and how skateboarding makes that malleable through like almost these like individual acts of resistance of like, I'm going to skate this ledge right here or these stairs next to a no skateboarding sign, but also in tandem with like knowing the realities of being a person of color and like skating. Like I grew up in East Side San Jose, and the first time and I was a kid in like the early 2000s. And so the first representation that I saw of like my friends and our neighborhood and like ourselves was What's Up Rockers.
Wow.
And that was what like we identified with in East Side San Jose in like 2006.
Yeah.
And so I just like, I find it really interesting how you're talking about space and time and music. And I'm like, wow, these little kind of acts of resistance that make these barriers, whether it's, these geographical or colonial or whatever barriers, malleable to something else that's magic. So I'm excited to read your book.
Oh, thank you.
And shout out to Moody Slam Poets. I might not be a super skateboarder, but everybody I love, I sit through their One More Tries for hours and hours.
There we go.
And cheer with the same level of excitement from when they first started. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you for that. Thank you. I think just kind of piggybacking off of that point, when you see these representations of something that feels akin to yourself or your background or your culture, in this case, like What's Up Rockers, there's that. I had those moments too growing up where like, even before I skated, you see skateboarding like on TV or in a music video or something, or you see some character in a fictional movie that just looks cool and you're like, that person looks like someone I want to like become or like hang out with as an adult, or like, I don't know, like there's almost like these kind of models that you aspire to, or just like these mirrors that you see through popular culture. And I very much felt that way too when I saw certain skaters. Like all my favorite skaters had something that like I kind of wanted to emulate or kind of be. Same with like a lot of favorite musicians. Like I feel like I'm still trying to dress like Guy from Fugazi like most of my life, and like it's just like these heroes that you pick up at an early age. They can, thankfully, through like subcultures like skateboarding and other kind of aligned stuff, it creates these examples that you either like kind of like, oh, that's me, like I see myself here, or you're like, that's not it. It can be different. And I think that's what kind of got me into writing, which was like, yeah, that's true, but like, what if we tackled it this way? Or like, what if we talked about things this way? Like, yeah, skateboarding, and we should shout out our like black and brown skaters as an industry, but like, can we talk about how at a session, like, how do we engage the fact that maybe when the cops come, like, are there practices as an industry or as skaters we can do to like make sure that everyone at the session is safe? And I think that's what I liked a lot about Rockers during the pandemic, is that in a traditionally red line neighborhood that economically definitely dictates a certain community, I would say, here's a bunch of skaters from all over, and locally too, from different parts of Oakland, that are just showing up and showing what their community looks like, and holding space. You know, it's really fun to see that. There's a fun fulfill the dream. This is kind of getting inside baseball, but there's a fun session that happens in the beginning of Peter Smolik's part, right at these handrails that are right next to Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, and it's these kind of like hip hop, like these dudes that kind of look like they're trying to be Eminem circa 1998, that are like, you know, talking mad shit to different security guards, hollering at girls on the street. It's kind of like, it's disruptive, it's crazy, it's nutty, but it's like, here's a bunch of dummies like hanging out on Rodeo Drive trying to get a trick. That's kind of funny. Not as deep as some of the examples that we were talking about before, but just like that kind of disruption, I think is something that skateboarding always has, and I think always creates like these new scenarios wherever skateboarding exists. I don't know. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. It's cool because it's the Bay. I just moved back from Portland, Oregon, where it's like there's not as much conversation. I mean, there's conversation, but like it is white by default.
Mm-hmm.
And so like really just like the fact that you've written something with your culture and your perspective behind it, it's like, okay, I can resonate with this.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jose and Ted. This is rad. I guess I'm always curious, like how, to me, like skateboarding is it's like a culture, you know, or like the idea of art and beauty, and like grown men and grown women sort of like attacking the streets in a way that it's sort of this like moment of beauty, or like a frozen moment of memory that only you know about because you felt it, and like you have to capture it in a photo, or like try to catch it in a poem, or whatever that taste is, or that sense, like that feeling. And so the idea that it's like an art form, because it is about a feeling, it's about a combination of all these things that like we feel and we can't explain. And so we're trying all these things to sort of say, how do you explain that feeling of like landing a kickflip, or like an ollie, or like that moment of like, oh, you're fucking with gravity, or like, what do we try? Like, we're just trying to undo sort of what our basic instinct is. Like, are you sure? Let me try it. Or like, what is that empirical sort of sense that we all have? And as a group, like, how do we frame that as art and not like terrorism or something else, so that what we're doing is an expression of society, and like that's it. So that when the cops come, they know that that's an art form and not like an illegal sort of terrorist property damaging activity.
Yeah. I think like,
I would not frame it as an art form.
yeah. I was like, I know Ted's answer on this. I think, I don't know. I think it's, I kind of censor it recently in describing, like, talking about skateboarding in the wake of this book. I've really been centralizing skateboarding as like a culture, and because of all the different participants in it, and all those different participants, to your question, or to your comment about like, we're all trying to describe this feeling of like beating gravity, of like these very small, like split-second moments that have like huge implications, and you know, that just like create this kind of feeling inside of us, right? I don't know, there's representations of skateboarding, you know, through photography and things like that. You know, you can make the argument around like artistic principles of that documentation and stuff, but I think that the cool thing about skateboarding is that once you really start enjoying it and start loving it, you start to see the value of all these very small moments, or these very small granular spots, or these different very small things that are valuable or have meaning to you now by way of this act or by way of this thing. And I think with a lot of Chipped, I'm trying to extrapolate that kind of sense of love or that sense of passion to like, if that's one of the many ways that skateboarding kind of impacted my life or my perspective on things, like what are the other things, and like how are these all like as impactful? Because I feel like as skaters sometimes we get so obsessed with it that we don't see other forms as like as valuable or having as influence or even vice versa, like our influence on the larger culture. So having more of that relationship and having skateboarding almost exist less in isolation, which is ironic given how we exist on the streets. And the way that we talk about it, I think, is a big goal of Chipped in a sense.
Yeah, I think what one of the really interesting things that you attempt to do in Chipped is to look at other things outside of skateboarding as passionately and as authentically and with the same fervor as any skateboarder approaches skateboarding. And like, you know, I don't like calling skateboarding one thing or another, but what I do think is that it's this authentic bridge with other people, and also to, once you get into it, it's the best way to have like the most intense sensory experience in space. You know, like it just attunes you to everything else. Like it, so I loved, not to go back to what we were saying, but like as you're learning to define your body physically in space as a skateboarder, you're also learning or working on describing that experience as a poet, as a writer. And I think maybe we could look at this book as the one result of a lifelong devotion to these two things, that very few skateboarders or writers can do both.
No, I mean, it's like, and as the older you get as a skater too, you're continuously trying to explain this thing that you do to other people as you age, right? So like, you know, explaining to someone you're dating in your 20s about like why, you know, skateboarding matters to you, and like having to explain that at 30 and 35 and now at the age of 65. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Would anyone like to Oh, we said everything. Cool. Oh, Tony, yeah.
There's obviously a lot of talk about how the pandemic maybe you know, affected how we engage and interact with a lot of things. And skateboarding is one of those things, and obviously it extended much beyond skating. But you know, I'm curious as to how you feel like coming out of that like heavy pandemic era, then you know, changed your relationship with skating and the rest of and other things as well after that, because you know, it doesn't just go back to like, oh, this is exactly how it was pre-pandemic. You know?
No, it's totally different. You know, like I have a stronger relationship with skateboarding post, like in this part of the, wherever we're at in the pandemic, like, so that helps, like knowing, kind of almost coming out of it with like a different skill or like a different relationship with myself as a skater by way of slappies and stuff like that. I think I also moved to Sacramento in 2021. Like Ted and I actually met the day before I moved to Sacramento, which was hilarious and ironic, but like, yeah, that also changed my spatial relationship with skateboarding. I went from like, I'm going to Rockridge, I'm going to like wherever, like, you know, Blue Ledge or like, you know, downtown spots in Oakland, and I'm going instead to like, I don't know, like I'm figuring it out. I'm going to skate parks that I'm not like, let's go to the park kind of guy, you know, like, so just as I got comfortable with like this spot that I know like the back of my hand in the form of Rockridge, I got thrown a life curveball, and it's like, well, you got to figure out your comfort zone all over again in the wake of the pandemic and with totally new scene. And it was just like, I just kind of had no other choice but to just adjust. And I think a big theme of the book is like how skateboarding just forces you to constantly just try and face vulnerability, whether you like it or not. And so, yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah. But I think like, I'm kind of still trying to answer that and figure it out as I get like older and older by the day. I'll let you know if I land a big spin kickflip by 40. That's the goal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What's the next book?
Oh, shit. Well, there's like, I'm thinking I might try and do an East Coast interstate, like a version of like my dad's history, Puerto Rican side of my family, which would be a lot of East Harlem. If you know anything about the banks over there that used to be in Harlem, that where Big L grew up, let me know.
Yeah.
And then maybe a novella, maybe some fiction, maybe.
More books.
More books.
More nuclear war, please.
Yeah, more books. Yeah. Bomb Hills, Not Countries, more books.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Give it up for Ted Barrow.
Can we give one more hand for Jose and Ted? That was really fun, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you coming out. I appreciate everyone who tuned in online. Thank you so much. I am just here to say that we have copies of Jose's books at the front register. You can find them there. And my colleague Brendan at the back desk, right there. Hello, Brendan. Wave to the people. That is where Jose is going to be signing books, if that is okay.
Yes.
If you have any other questions, let me know. If not, we will see you next time. Thank you so much. Woo!